My relationship with my mother-in-law, Christine, has always been strained. Despite her mistreatment over the years, she's now asking for a significant favor from me. However, I'm seriously considering using the money for myself instead of fulfilling her request. Let me share my story. My mother-in-law has never treated me well, and the recent request she made comes after a history of disrespect. Even though she urged me to talk about my concerns before bidding me goodnight yesterday, she had called me a murderer among other hurtful things just a few days ago. She even told my daughter that she was good for nothing. I'm a 33-year-old woman who lost my husband in an accident 2 months ago, which was a profound shock for me and my children. Despite the challenges, I focused on supporting my kids. This led me to the decision to let Christine live with us after Ian's death, even though our relationship had never been positive. Christine and I never got along, and my late husband would attribute it to common behavior among mothers. I kept many of our conflicts hidden from him to avoid upsetting him. However, Christine's animosity towards me was apparent. She attempted to kick me out of the house multiple times and threatened to take my children away, claiming I wasn't fit to be a mother. Despite my efforts to be a perfect daughter-in-law, Christine continued to dislike me for irrational reasons. I eventually accepted that nothing would change her opinion, and I chose to ignore her petty and unreasonable behavior. Unfortunately, Christine's health deteriorated, and my biggest fear shifted from preserving my marriage to losing it. She had moved in 8 months before Ian's death, and during that time, she would complain to him and plant unfounded thoughts in his mind. Although those arguments are in the past, the memories linger, especially the ones involving my son Adam. My eldest, Adam, easily saw through Christine's manipulations and grew to dislike her. I discovered him arguing with her on multiple occasions, and he expressed his desire for her not to live with us anymore. I didn't intervene, as I was relieved that Adam saw the truth and was wise enough to shield his younger sisters from Christine's influence. After Ian's death and the funeral, the tensions persist, and now, faced with a hefty request from Christine, I'm contemplating redirecting the funds for my own well-being. Initially, I made the decision to ask Christine to move out, overwhelmed by the financial strain and the added responsibility of supporting another person. However, practicalities forced me to reconsider. Paying for a nurse to be with her in her own apartment was costly, and Ian had been opposed to the idea of placing her in an elderly home. Despite the challenges posed by Christine's presence, she did contribute by helping with cleaning and cooking, the latter being a point of contention as she claimed I was lacking in the kitchen. While it was irksome at first, I eventually let her take charge of the cooking, making my life more predictable. My routine involved enduring insults about my cooking and cleaning skills, consoling my children after Christine's outbursts, attempting to calm down my son Adam, and ending the day with a stress-induced headache. However, things took an unexpected turn when a lawyer visited me 6 days ago in response to our previous phone conversations. Desperate for cash, I had hoped for assets to sell or leverage. My financial worries seemed to dissipate when I inherited a significant amount from Ian. This windfall offered a lifeline, enabling me to support my family, avoid transferring my girls to another school, and even pursue my dream of starting a catering business. Excitedly, I shared the news with Adam, who, despite his joy, insisted on taking a gap year. Although I refrained from pressing the issue, I cautioned him not to disclose the newfound wealth. However, Christine eventually learned about the money and, surprisingly, showed a more humane side, asking how much I had received. This abrupt change in her behavior raised suspicions, especially considering she had never asked me for money before Ian's passing. Adam, perceptive as ever, believed Christine was putting on an act. Now faced with uncertainty, I grapple with whether to ignore his hunch or address the apparent shift in Christine's demeanor. The idea of confronting her about the sudden interest in the money crossed my mind, but instead, I considered the option of moving her back to her house and resuming the expense of hiring a nurse. It begged the question, was this a prudent use of money? This decision came shortly after my recent windfall. Adam's insight about his grandmother proved accurate. It became evident that her primary concern was the money Ian had left in his will. Consequently, I made the difficult decision to cut her off from the family, knowing well that dealing with Christine was never an easy task. When I broached the subject of her moving out, explaining that it was better for both me and the children, and that she could receive the care she apparently needed from a nurse, Christine initially resisted. She expressed her contentment living with me. Despite a brief argument during the second discussion, I decided to drop the matter, considering her recent tolerable behavior. However, my trust in her was shattered when I went out 4 days ago. Engaging in the initial steps of establishing my catering business, I received the request to prepare homemade snacks for an acquaintance. Upon returning home with supplies, I discovered my bedroom in disarray. After some reflection and confrontation, it became clear that Christine had rummaged through my belongings in my absence. The audacity of her actions shocked me. When I confronted her, she refused to disclose her motives and denied taking anything specific. Although nothing seemed missing, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had been searching for something among the papers in my room. For the time being, my immediate concern was the violation of privacy rather than any tangible loss. I needed to focus on building my business, having successfully delivered the snacks and secured another gig. The mystery of Christine's actions would have to wait. Contemplating ways to promote my cooking venture, I decided to create business cards to distribute among neighbors and even my children. However, my focus shifted back to the challenge of persuading Christine to move out. I approached her once again yesterday, expressing my need for personal space to concentrate on turning my cooking into a profitable venture. Unexpectedly, Christine resisted, offering to assist with my cooking. Despite declining her help, she became agitated. She presented me with two options, either letting her stay and help or allowing her to remain and be a constant annoyance. It became evident that removing my mother-in-law from the house would be no easy task. My determination to evict her intensified after a conversation with my youngest daughter, Susie. Adam, who usually picked her up from school, had something to attend to that day. Susie questioned why I wanted Christine out, revealing that Christine had been feeding her lies, claiming I hated her and wanted nothing to do with her. Susie expressed disappointment, insisting that her grandmother needed care and family time. Despite assuring Susie that Christine was merely joking, inwardly, I was seething. The realization that Christine was manipulating my children and turning them against me left me fuming. That night, Adam and Cecilia sensed my mood upon their return. Despite my attempts to hide it, I excused myself to my bedroom, asking Adam to handle everything. I questioned why Christine would resort to such actions, especially since my suggestion for her to move out was rooted in minimizing problems and ensuring better care for her. It seemed Christine was crossing boundaries and playing games with my children. Determined to address the situation, I decided that this should no longer remain a private family matter. The following morning, after the kids left, I had a one-on-one confrontation with Christine. I informed Christine firmly that she would be moving out of the house, and I made arrangements for her to return to her former apartment, which fortunately was vacant. Despite her resistance, I reminded her that she was in my house now, as everything had been left to me and the children. I suggested she leave voluntarily, avoiding the need for me to force her out, which would result in a reduction of the financial support I was providing. Christine responded by hurling various insults my way, but I chose to ignore them. My focus was on her departure, and I was prepared to show my true colors and be perceived as heartless if it meant relieving myself of the burden she had become. She left before the children returned, and I concocted a story for them, explaining that Christine had chosen to live on her own for a while but would visit soon. Although I disliked lying to my children, I believed it was necessary. With Christine out of the picture, I felt a tremendous weight lifted off my shoulders. My plan was to dedicate all my attention to my children and my work moving forward. Update number 2 brought an unexpected twist. Just over a month after leaving the house, Christine returned, causing a scene and threatening trouble if I didn't allow her to stay in what she referred to as her son's house. To avoid further disturbance, I let her inside with the intention of understanding her motives. Christine asserted that she was here to stay and that no threats would force her out. Then she dropped a bombshell. She accused me of coercing Ian into leaving everything to me and the children, neglecting her entirely. She vowed to prove it, even if it meant going to court, and threatened to take away everything Ian had left. Her accusations left me bewildered. While I had considered the absence of Christine in the will, I chose not to question the lawyer at the time. Ian must have had his reasons for excluding his mother. Perhaps he didn't anticipate her outliving him, especially given her health condition. Nevertheless, I recognized that nothing could be altered in the will, and my empathy was proving challenging for my own well-being. I reluctantly allowed Christine to stay the night, assuring myself that her departure would be ensured the next day. My son, though unhappy with my decision, eased up when I explained that Christine's stay was only temporary. In contrast, Cecilia and Susie were delighted to see their grandmother. However, my reservations persisted, recognizing that Christine, despite her familial connection, lacked the qualities of a positive role model or a genuinely good person. The following morning, I was confronted with a heated argument between Christine and Adam. My daughters looked frightened, prompting me to intervene. Upon inquiry, I discovered that Christine was questioning Cecilia about Ian's will. Adam, who overheard them, intervened and told Christine to cease her line of questioning. In response, Christine raised her voice and threatened to evict both me and my son once she proved that I tampered with the will. Enraged by Christine's audacity and hurtful comments toward my children, I had reached my limit. I quickly ushered my children out of the house, driving all four of us to the courthouse to file for a restraining order against Christine. After dropping my children off at a cafe, I returned home to confront Christine, informing her of the legal action I had taken. I made it clear that her continued stay in the house would not matter once the restraining order was in place, and with that, I left her in the bedroom. About half an hour later, I heard her leave, relieved that she had at least the sense to comply. Christine proved to be all talk and no substance when faced with a firm stance. I finally enjoyed a week of peace of mind until Christine started excessively calling. Choosing to ignore most of her calls and even blocking her, I found some reprieve. However, she resorted to calling on the landline, and when I answered, it turned out to be the nurse taking care of Christine, informing me of her deteriorating health. Advised to take her to the hospital due to rising blood pressure, I faced yet another unexpected turn of events. I suspected that Christine's health crisis might be another ploy to manipulate me into taking her back, but I decided to verify. After accompanying her to the hospital, it became clear that her condition was genuine. For the first time since meeting Christine, I felt genuine pity for her. The doctor explained that she needed an extended hospital stay and 24/7 attention, and she lacked health insurance. However, the estimated cost of her treatment presented a dilemma. I had already allocated a significant amount of money I had left behind for my children's education and to build my business. If I used it for Christine's treatment, I have little left for my family. The only alternative was dipping into funds I had set aside, a decision I wasn't sure about. Balancing my responsibilities to my family and recognizing Christine as Ian's mother and the children's grandmother complicated matters. Feeling confused, I sought advice from others and provided an update. While Christine had caused trouble in my life, I couldn't easily abandon her. Update number 3 expressed gratitude for the advice received. Still perplexed, I discussed the situation with Adam, seeking his perspective. Surprisingly, he expressed hesitance to cover Christine's bills, considering the turmoil she had caused and might cause in the future. Shocked by Adam's response, I acknowledged my desire for Christine to recover, but questioned whether it was my sole responsibility to address her predicament. Despite this conversation, I remained conflicted about how to proceed. I pondered Christine's dependence on Ian and the passing of that responsibility to me. Eventually, I had a discussion with the doctor the next day. Reluctantly, I agreed to contribute to Christine's hospital fees. When I approached her, she looked worn and weary, but I remained steadfast in my decision. I made it clear that while I didn't want to cover her entire hospital expenses, I was willing to pay a substantial portion. The catch? She had to agree to leave me and my children alone. During a catering delivery, I'd overheard a client discussing a nearby state's senior care facility. Intrigued, I researched it and decided that once Christine recovered, that would be her new residence. Providing her with all the necessary details, I hoped she would consider the idea. However, Christine's initial silence gave way to lamenting Ian's death and resuming insults. Even on what could have been her deathbed, she showed no regard for me. Christine then demanded that I settle all the bills, justifying it by Anne being the one who earned the money. Asserting that the money was now mine, I criticized her stubbornness. The insults continued, but I remained unfazed, accustomed to her hurtful words. She attempted emotional blackmail, referencing my children and Ian, but I stood my ground. Considering leaving her fate to chance, Christine called me back, reluctantly agreeing to my conditions. Due to the restraining order, she couldn't approach me or my children anyway. Though Christine was discharged after 9 days, the doctor advised constant vigilance. For a week, she stayed with me and the children, and when the arrangements for her departure were finalized, she left without incident. I experienced a twinge of guilt, noticing a hint of sadness in Christine's eyes as she departed. Yet, I remained resolute in my decision. It was too late to turn back now. Nearly 2 decades into my marriage, Christine chose to treat us as a family only now. For once, her emotions were no longer my concern. Ensuring Christine received the remaining deposit intended for her landlord, initially allocated for a month's stay, I encouraged her to keep the money for emergencies. I also took on the responsibility of managing her finances, severing any further ties. When I inquired about the possibility of visits, Christine responded with a malicious laugh and a curt refusal. I found her answer satisfactory, needing only to concoct a suitable excuse when my children inevitably asked about their grandmother. Surprisingly, they didn't, and the weeks without Christine's presence were peaceful. I recently checked in on her, a gesture out to Ian, and learned she was not unwell. Adam, seeking guidance on his college plans, had indicated that he needed to figure things out. As someone who didn't follow the traditional college path, I found myself uncertain about advising him. On a positive note, my mini catering business thrived, bringing happiness to me and my children. With the hope of avoiding serious obstacles in the future, we continued our journey. The comments received from the previous story indicated a lack of satisfaction with how I handled the situation. Many expressed the wish that I had cut off all contact without extending assistance, even though I had established ground rules before agreeing to cover part of Christine's hospital expenses. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this matter. If you're new to the channel, I'm Mr. Reddito, and I narrate various dramatic stories every day, including mother-in-law dramas, inheritance disputes, cheating stories, Karen encounters, wedding fiascos, and more. I look forward to your thoughts, and remember, it's cool to be kind. Have a great day. I've been hesitant to involve myself with my brother Kevin for the past 5 years. Our relationship took a significant hit when I discovered, at the age of 22, that my girlfriend of 3 years was having an affair with him. This betrayal led to the end of my relationship, and I moved back in with my parents, sharing proof of the affair with them. Despite Kevin's attempts to reconcile and apologize, I maintained my distance, prompting my parents to organize an intervention involving my ex, Kevin, and extended family. However, instead of fostering forgiveness, this intervention deepened my hurt and resentment. Unable to bear the pain, I eventually decided to cut ties with Kevin and my parents, except for occasional contact with a cousin due to my grandmother's health issues. Recently, during a visit to the hospital, I unexpectedly encountered Kevin. Though he expressed a desire to talk and reconcile, I feigned ignorance, leaving him emotional and distraught. Learning about Kevin's deteriorating mental health since our estrangement, my parents pleaded with me to reconnect with him, insisting that my support could alleviate his suffering. Despite their pleas, I adamantly refused, expressing my belief that Kevin's mental well-being shouldn't rest on my shoulders. My refusal led to Kevin attempting self-harm, which my parents attributed to my rejection. Faced with this distressing situation, I grappled with conflicting emotions, torn between the desire to protect my own well-being and the pain inflicted on my brother. In reflecting on my experiences, I struggled to reconcile the profound sense of betrayal with the familial bond we once shared. Despite external pressure and the genuine concern for Kevin's mental health, I find myself unable to forgive and rebuild a relationship that was shattered by his actions. In grappling with the aftermath, I question whether my decision to keep my distance makes me the wrongdoer in this familial saga. I have been in a relationship with my girlfriend, Janine, for 8 years. While our connection has been strong in many aspects, our intimate life has dwindled significantly over the past 2 years, reaching a point where we haven't been intimate for 4 months. Despite my efforts to address and resolve this issue, Janine has shown reluctance to seek medical help or engage in couples therapy. As we planned to move in together and buy a house, I expressed my concern about our intimate life, stating that I wasn't comfortable taking the next step without improvement in that aspect. This discussion stemmed from a prior agreement where Janine had acknowledged the need to work on our intimate life before moving forward. However, she hadn't made any efforts or taken any actions during that year. When I shared my hesitation to pursue the next stage of our relationship due to the unresolved issue, Janine became furious, accusing me of holding our future hostage for more intimacy. She left, and since then, I've received a text message informing me that she won't be attending a planned dinner date until I decide not to be in a hole anymore. While I believe my concerns are valid, I'm now questioning if I am the one at fault for halting our plans and potentially jeopardizing our future together. Am I the a-hole for prioritizing our sexual compatibility before committing to buying a house and taking our relationship further?